Here's the cold, hard truth. Most shoppers strolling through their local grocery store right now have no clue what's brewing beneath the surface. A few empty shelves here, a sudden price hike there, it's easy to dismiss as normal, but what's unfolding is far from ordinary. It's a creeping disaster, a silent collapse of the food supply chain that's been months in the making. And trust me, by the time the masses catch on, it'll be too late. This isn't just inflation or a passing shortage, it's a system unraveling at its core. Retailers won't admit it, but the cracks are widening, and the essentials you depend on could vanish before December 20. I've been tracking this for months, and what I've uncovered is chilling, especially number 7. It left even me stunned. Let's dive in before these critical items disappear forever. 1. The vanishing olive oil. Something is deeply wrong on the grocery shelves, and if you look closely, you can see it in the olive oil aisle. The once abundant rows of gleaming green bottles are thinning, the labels you trust are disappearing, and the prices are climbing into territory that feels less like inflation and more like a ransom. This is not a temporary market swing or a minor supply hiccup. This is the quiet, creeping death of the global olive oil supply, a canary in the coal mine for the systemic economic collapse that is unfolding right under our noses. The foundations are cracking, and the liquid gold you drizzle on your salads is one of the first things to seep through. The epicenter of this disaster lies in Spain and Italy, the undisputed titans of olive oil production that together account for over 60% of the world's supply. These regions have just suffered their most catastrophic harvest in living memory. The past summer was not just hot, it was a relentless, scorching assault. For weeks on end, temperatures blasted past 1115 degrees Fahrenheit, literally baking the olives while they were still clinging to the branches. The trees, ancient and resilient, were stressed to their breaking point. Just as the scorched earth began to cool, Italy was slammed by unprecedented autumn floods, a deluge that washed away what little hope remained. The result is a production freefall. The International Olive Council has confirmed a staggering 35% drop in global output from the previous season. A decline of that magnitude isn't just a statistic, it's a death sentence for affordability and availability. Extra virgin olive oil, the benchmark for quality, is facing an existential threat because its production demands pristine, healthy olives, a resource that has become terrifyingly scarce. The very people who have dedicated their lives to these groves are sounding the alarm. One veteran Italian farmer with 4 decades of experience confessed he has never seen his trees so barren and stressed. His words should send a chill down your spine as they signal a deviation from the natural order, a sign of a deeply disturbed system. Prices have already leaped by 45% since last November, and market analysts are grimly forecasting another 30% surge before spring even arrives. When a staple good accelerates in price this violently, it's a clear symptom of profound instability, a contagion that will inevitably spread. Preparation is no longer a suggestion, it is a necessity. If olive oil is a cornerstone of your pantry, waiting is a fool's errand. The time to secure your supply is now, focusing on high-quality extra virgin varieties. When the supply chain tightens further, retailers will protect their high-volume contracts with restaurants, leaving individual shoppers like you to face the empty shelves.
2. The cocoa collapse.
Just as the olive oil crisis paints a grim picture of agricultural fragility, the situation unraveling in the world of cocoa amplifies that warning to a terrifying scream. While olive oil is a staple of the kitchen, cocoa is a staple of the soul. It is the currency of comfort, the reward for a hard day, the simple joy families turn to in moments of both celebration and stress. Now, that very comfort is being methodically stripped away, and its scarcity will leave a bitter taste. The price of cocoa has not just risen, it has detonated, soaring over 78% in the last year alone, to reach unprecedented all-time highs. This is not a fleeting price bubble. It is the echo of a structural collapse happening thousands of miles away, a death rattle from the heart of the world's chocolate supply. The world's reliance on a single region for this precious commodity has made it catastrophically vulnerable. West Africa, the source of over 70% of the planet's cocoa, is in the throes of its most ruinous growing season in decades. Ghana and the Ivory Coast are grappling with a trifecta of disasters: aging, unproductive trees, relentless and extreme heat waves, and the insidious spread of a fungal disease known as swollen shoot virus, which is decimating entire plantations with the speed of a plague. Production has plummeted by nearly 30% in just the past month. a figure that is almost unthinkable in a stable global market. The corporate giants of the confectionery world are already making sinister, calculated moves. Brands you've known your whole life are quietly engaging in shrinkflation, reducing the size of their products while simultaneously jacking up the prices, a predatory one-two punch to the consumer. The chocolate bar that cost you $2 last year is now smaller, thinner, and costs nearly $4. This is merely the opening act. The real horror show begins when the shortages hit the retail level. Insiders are whispering dire warnings, telling major retailers to brace for receiving as little as 40% of their standard chocolate inventory by the end of the quarter. That means the baking aisle will be a ghost town, no cocoa powder, no baking chips. The seasonal candy displays will be barren wastelands. The situation is so dire that some grocery executives are drafting guidance for their stores to implement rationing, limiting shoppers to a mere 2 chocolate items per visit. When a store begins to police your access to a basic good, you are no longer a customer. You are a supplicant in a broken system. This is about more than losing a treat. In times of prolonged crisis and economic decay, these small comforts become critical pillars of morale. Chocolate is an ideal preparedness item, storing remarkably well for long periods. The moment to build your reserve is now, before the shelves are picked clean and rationing becomes the law of the land. 3. The citrus catastrophe. As the shadows lengthen over the cocoa and olive oil markets, a far more alarming crisis is taking hold of citrus, one of the most fundamental and nutritionally vital food groups on Earth. Citrus is not a luxury. These fruits are foundational, providing the world with a primary source of natural vitamin C, essential oils, and flavor profiles that are woven into the fabric of our food system. They are in thousands of products you consume daily, from juices and supplements to marinades and cleaners. Right now, this cornerstone of global nutrition is crumbling, entering one of the most severe supply collapses in modern history, and its fallout will be felt everywhere. The American citrus industry, once a symbol of agricultural prowess, is on its knees. Florida's groves, engine of the nation's orange supply, have been brutalized by a relentless series of hurricanes. These were not glancing blows. The storm struck with malevolent precision during the most vulnerable flowering stage, not just destroying the current harvest, but inflicting deep, lasting trauma on the trees that will cripple them for years. The United States Department of Agriculture has delivered the verdict. Florida's orange harvest is down by a staggering 63% from last year, a number that plunges production to a 90-year low. This is not a downturn, it is a wipeout. But the contagion is global. Europe, which provides a massive share of the world's lemons and specialty citrus, just endured its hottest winter ever recorded. In Spain and Italy, the backbone of the continent's citrus industry, lemon yields have imploded, falling by nearly. Growers are reporting fruits that are small, dry, and of miserably low quality. The market is already reacting with brutal efficiency. Importers are rerouting their dwindling supplies away from public grocery stores and toward the highest bidders, restaurants and beverage corporations. This means you will be the last to know, facing empty produce bins long after businesses have secured their share. A major U.S. grocery chain has already issued an internal memo warning that its suppliers cannot guarantee any lemon or grapefruit deliveries past the middle of next month. The ripple effects are spreading with chilling speed. A shortage of citrus places immense pressure on other fruit categories, creating a domino effect that is already driving up the prices of berries and apples. With the supply chains failing in plain sight, the citrus shortage is yet another flashing red light on the dashboard of a system spiraling out of control. 4. The coffee crisis. As the foundations of our food supply continue to crack, another daily ritual is being placed on the sacrificial altar. For countless people, coffee is more than just a morning beverage, it is the fuel for modern life, a non-negotiable component of daily stability and focus. That stability is about to be shattered. The very systems that deliver this essential comfort are seizing up and the signs are impossible to ignore. The International Coffee Organization has issued a stark confirmation. Global production has plunged to its lowest point in nearly a decade. This is not a temporary dip. The forces driving this collapse are structural, deep-rooted, and directly linked to the broader systemic decay happening across the globe. The crisis is unfolding on multiple fronts, a perfect storm of climate catastrophe and logistical failure. Brazil, the undisputed king of coffee production, is withering under its most severe drought in generations. Recent satellite imagery paints a terrifying picture of scorched earth. with soil moisture levels so depleted that entire plantations of young coffee plants are dying on the vine before they ever have a chance to tutor. At the same time, Colombia, another pillar of the coffee world, is drowning. Unprecedented, catastrophic floods have washed away nearly a third of this season's harvest, a devastating blow to a nation prized for its high-quality beans. Meanwhile, in Vietnam, the dominant force in the Robusta market, a different kind of rot has set in. Crippling labor shortages mean the beans are left to fester and decay on the trees, with simply no one available to harvest them. These three regions, which collectively supply the vast majority of the world's coffee, are all in simultaneous crippling crisis. The shockwaves are already hitting consumers, though many have yet to realize the scale of the disaster. Retailers are quietly implementing purchase limits on popular brands, a subtle form of rationing that precedes empty shelves. Corporate giants like Starbucks have already initiated aggressive price hikes, with an average increase of 18% and more on the horizon. The first to disappear will be the premium Arabica beans, the smooth, flavorful varieties that most drinkers prefer. Their scarcity will send a ripple of panic through the market. Soon after, even the price of instant coffee, often the last refuge during shortages, is projected to skyrocket. This is the final warning. The time to build your reserve is now. Secure your favorite whole beans and learn to store them for the long term in airtight containers, away from light and heat. Consider diversifying your stock with both Arabica and the more resilient Robusta varieties to give yourself options. In a world spiraling toward instability, securing your daily coffee supply is not a luxury. It is an act of defiance against the coming chaos. 5. The seafood abyss. The decay is not confined to the land. As staple crops like coffee become precious commodities, the crisis is spreading into the vast, dark expanse of our oceans. Seafood has long been a sensitive barometer for both environmental stress and economic turmoil, and right now that barometer is signaling a code red emergency. Both forces are converging with a ferocity never seen before, threatening to empty our nets and seafood counters for the foreseeable future. The National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration just imposed the most severe emergency fishing restrictions in over 50. This is not a routine regulatory adjustment. It is a desperate last-ditch effort to prevent the complete and irreversible collapse of several key fish populations. These are not conservation measures, they are panic measures. The science behind this collapse is chilling. Monitors have recorded drastic and rapid shifts in ocean temperatures, forcing entire ecosystems into chaos. Fish are migrating into deeper, colder, or unfamiliar waters, far outside the reach of conventional fishing fleets. The first and most prominent casualty is wild-caught salmon. Citing dangerously low population counts, Alaska has already been forced to slash its fishing permits by a staggering. As a result, prices shot up by nearly 30% in a single month, and major grocery chains are internally preparing for salmon to completely vanish from their stores. The Pacific Northwest tells an equally grim tale, with the Columbia River reporting its lowest salmon return in over 3 decades. When a keystone species like salmon disappears, it's a sign that the entire marine food web is unraveling. The blight is spreading. The Gulf Coast, a primary source for shrimp, saw its waters warmed by 3 degrees above the norm, utterly disrupting breeding cycles and devastating populations. This environmental disaster was compounded by a massive container spill in Louisiana that poisoned critical harvesting zones, causing shrimp prices to surge by. Worse, suppliers are now warning that future shipments will consist almost entirely of small, low-grade shrimp, as premium sizes have become nearly impossible to find. Then there is the crab. The Pacific Northwest season was abruptly cut short, with a 62% free fall in the commercial catch. Some seafood distributors have been given a final, grim deadline. Expect 0 Dungeness crab shipments after mid-March. This is your final opportunity to prepare. Stock your freezer with what you can find, focusing on frozen varieties that can last. Consider more stable, farm-raised alternative. The oceans are screaming a warning, and only those who listen and act now will have anything to show for it when the tide goes out for good. 6. The rice reckoning. If the shortages of specialty items like seafood and coffee are concerning, the crisis brewing in the global rice market is an existential threat. This is not just another item on the grocery list. This is the single most important staple food for more than half of the human population. A coffee shortage is an inconvenience. A rice shortage is a humanitarian catastrophe. Right now, the global rice market is spiraling into its most severe breakdown in nearly 2 decades, a seismic shock to the foundation of global food security. The world is facing an 8.5 million metric ton shortfall, the largest deficit recorded since 2004. Rice, the crop that is supposed to be the bedrock of stability and predictability, is buckling under the immense pressure of a failing system. This collapse is the result of a convergence of climate extremes and disastrous political maneuvers. In some of the world's most vital rice-producing regions, biblical floods have submerged and destroyed entire harvests. In others, relentless heat waves have scorched the fields, withering the crops before they can be gathered. Farmers who have depended on predictable seasonal rains for generations are watching their livelihoods die, with yield losses exceeding. Just as the world needed a steady hand, the planet's largest rice exporter, India, slammed the door shut. In a move to protect its own domestic supply, India imposed draconian export bans and price controls. When India choked off its exports of non-basmati white rice, it sent an immediate shockwave across the planet. Global prices exploded by 15 to 20% overnight, triggering waves of panic buying in dependent nations from the Philippines to West Africa. Even after the ban was partially eased, the damage was done. India implemented a minimum export price, ensuring that rice would remain permanently more expensive for every nation that relies on its supply. This political power play has drained global inventories to dangerously low levels, and now the United States is beginning to feel the squeeze. California's own Calrose rice production has declined due to persistent, multi-year droughts, gutting the domestic availability of short-grain varieties. At the same time, premium imported options like jasmine and basmati are becoming increasingly rare and expensive as export rules continue to tighten in Thailand, Vietnam, and Pakistan. Now is the time to take this threat seriously. Secure your supply of long-grain white rice, which has a shelf life measured in decades when stored properly in mylar bags with oxygen absorbers. Diversify your pantry with other grains. Calculate your household's needs and build a buffer that can withstand the coming storm. In a world on the brink, rice isn't just a food, it's survival. 7. The berry breakdown. As the core staples of the global food supply begin to buckle, the contagion of scarcity spreads to the fresh produce aisle. One of the most telling indicators of this systemic rot is the impending collapse of fresh berry supplies. It's easy to dismiss berries as a simple luxury, but their disappearance is a sinister omen. In any collapsing economy, it is the erosion of these small, normal comforts that signals a much deeper and more pervasive stress on the entire system. Berries are now the latest sacrifice to the trifecta of extreme weather, critical labor shortages, and logistical failures that are redrawing the map of food availability. The heart of America's berry industry, California just endured its driest winter in 15 years, with rainfall plummeting 42% below the average. This isn't just a dry spell, it's a death sentence for delicate blossoms, resulting in smaller yields and weaker fruit right from the start of the season. Compounding the disaster on the West Coast, Florida, which provides the nation's first taste of spring berries, was ambushed by 3 separate and unseasonable frost events in January. These cold snaps flash froze the fields, wiping out nearly a third of the early crops before they even had a chance to ripen. This dual-coast catastrophe would be enough to cripple the market on its own, but the crisis is international. Mexico, the critical supplier that bridges the gap between the US and Canadian growing seasons, is reporting a gut-wrenching 35% drop in berry exports. This isn't due to weather, but to a crippling labor shortage. Thousands of acres of ripe, perfect fruit are being left to rot in the fields because there are not enough hands to pick them. This is why your local grocery store is already making quiet preparations to slash its berry shelf space by as much as 40% in the coming months, shifting that precious real estate to produce with a more reliable supply. Prices are already beginning their terrifying ascent. Strawberries are on track to hit $8.99 a pound, while a tiny 6-ounce container of blueberries may soon cost you $17. Many stores are drafting plans to stop ordering organic raspberries altogether once the wholesale cost makes them unprofitable. This is your final chance to act. 8. The flower famine. As the vibrant colors of fresh berries fade from the produce section, the breakdown seeps deeper into the pantry, targeting the very ingredients of home and hearth. An often overlooked but increasingly fragile category is specialty flours. These are no longer niche products for the health-conscious. They have become essential staples for millions of families navigating soaring wheat prices, navigating dietary needs, and seeking refuge from an unstable grain market. But these alternatives are now facing their own catastrophic failure, driven by a sinister combination of environmental collapse, snarled global shipping, and a surge in demand that has overwhelmed suppliers. The first to fall is almond flour. California, the source of virtually all almonds in the United States, has been ravaged by years of relentless drought. which has decimated harvests and sent prices into the stratosphere. With fewer almonds available, every product derived from them, from milk to flour, is becoming a luxury item. The crisis doesn't stop there. Coconut flour is also vanishing. The tropical regions where coconuts are grown have been battered by unpredictable storms while simultaneously grappling with their own labor shortages and skyrocketing transportation costs. The result is a supply chain in chaos, with inconsistent shipments and increasingly empty shelves. Oat flour, once a reliable and affordable alternative, has become a victim of its own success. The gluten-free explosion created a demand that processors were never equipped to handle, and now they can't keep up. Even chickpea and cassava flours, foundational ingredients in plant-based and grain-free cooking, are experiencing severe shortages as more and more households abandon traditional wheat. The numbers paint a grim picture. The specialty flour market is expanding at over 10% a year, but production is lagging far behind. This fatal mismatch is creating a perfect storm of higher prices and chronic unavailability, forcing retailers to cut back on variety to avoid the embarrassment of empty stock. Preparation is no longer a choice. It is a strategic imperative. Secure the specialty flours you depend on now, while they can still be found. Store them in airtight containers to maximize their shelf life. More importantly, learn to be versatile. You can grind your own rolled oats into flour or adapt recipes to use what is available. When the basic building blocks of baking disappear from mainstream stores, only those who prepared will be able to provide for their family. 9. The meat meltdown. With alternative flours becoming scarce and baking staples turning into precious goods, the crisis now strikes at the heart of the dinner table: meat. Protein is the non-negotiable foundation of household nutrition. When specific cuts of meat begin to systematically disappear, it is not just a shortage, it is a clear and present signal of a fundamental breakdown in our food infrastructure. The warnings emanating from the meat industry have never been more dire. Processing plants across the nation's heartland are running at a mere 72% capacity, a precipitous drop from last year's 88%. The reason is terrifyingly simple: they cannot find enough workers. In the last 60 days alone, 3 major processing facilities have shut their doors for good, slashing national output and sending shockwaves through the supply chain. When the failure occurs at the processing level, the impact on consumers is swift and brutal. The first items to be sacrificed are the premium cuts. Ribeye steaks, beef tenderloin, and other high-end selections are already down by more than 43% in retail inventory compared to this time last year. This is a controlled demolition. Retailers are deliberately diverting this dwindling supply to their high-paying restaurant and wholesale clients, leaving everyday shoppers like you to face empty coolers and prices that mock your budget. Pork shoulder, once a bastion of affordability, has seen demand explode as families turn to slow cooking to stretch their food dollars. That surge has now outstripped supply, pushing prices higher and making it the next cut to become scarce. Then there is the bizarre and sudden crisis in chicken wings. A convergence of spring sporting events and nationwide production shortages means wing prices are projected to double by mid-month. Distributors are already putting retailers on notice. Inventory will be strictly rationed. When corporations begin rationing protein, you must understand that the situation is far more grave than you are being told. This is where foresight becomes your greatest weapon. It is time to pivot to less popular but equally versatile cuts like chuck roast, pork loin, and chicken thighs. These items currently have a more stable supply and offer better value. Cultivate relationships with local butchers or small farms, as they are often insulated from the failures of the national chains. When you see a sale, buy in bulk, portion the meat, and secure it in your freezer. In the economy that is emerging, protein security is synonymous with survival. 10. The dairy descent. As the meat counter thins out and families scramble to adjust their meals, another silent but equally insidious shortage is taking root. This one targets the millions of people who depend on non-dairy options for their health, be it due to allergies, intolerances, or personal conviction. Dairy alternatives, a category that was once a symbol of abundance and choice, are now facing a severe and widely underestimated supply crisis. What makes this particular collapse so frightening is that its origins are not just agricultural, but industrial. A number of the largest plant-based milk producers have been forced to report manufacturing shutdowns. The reason? A global shortage of specialized processing equipment, with critical machinery parts backordered for months. Without these unique components, entire production lines are sitting dormant, guaranteeing that shelves will grow emptier by the week. The situation on the agricultural side is just as bleak. Almond milk, the reigning king of dairy alternatives, has been crippled by California's historic droughts. The state's almond yield is down a devastating 31%, with farmers bluntly stating that the recent harvest was the worst in more than a decade. Oat milk, the celebrated successor to the throne, is also collapsing under the weight of its own popularity. 3 of the 5 largest oat milk brands have already been forced to pause production on flavored varieties to conserve their dwindling resources for their most basic products. Organic versions are set to disappear first, followed by the barista blends that coffee shops depend on. Furthermore, a contamination crisis at a key European supplier of fermentation cultures has choked off the supply of essential microbes needed to create plant-based yogurts and cheeses. With no immediate solution, the effects are cascading across the globe. Demand for plant-based dairy is surging, jumping 27% last quarter alone, while production capacity has only managed to increase by a meager 8%. When demand outpaces supply by a factor of 3, shortages are not just a possibility, they are an inevitability. Families who rely on these products for medical reasons will be hit the hardest. Your preparation must begin today. Stock up on shelf-stable plant-based milks. Learn the simple skill of making your own oat milk at home with just oats, water, and a blender. In this environment, self-sufficiency is the ultimate security.